Deion Sanders in Colorado had an open practice yesterday, and we're going to talk about how it went.
You are Locked On Buffs, your daily podcast on the Colorado Buffaloes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Buffs. I am your host, Kevin Borba. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, the sport stops sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. So visit FanDuel.com to get started. We are also brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And we all love free things. And we all love the birthday boy, Scott Procter. Scott from the Coloradoan. How you doing? Thanks for joining us.
Hey, I'm doing well, man. I appreciate you having me on again, Kevin. It's been a little while. A lot has happened since the last time we chopped it up.
Yeah.
So let's hop into it, my boy. Glad to be here with
you. You're a year and a day older now, so you're just
Crazy.
More wise and more experienced. Let's talk about the practice. So for those of you that didn't know, Colorado had a practice in Denver at, I believe it was like a local high school, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Local high school. And fans could have gone, scan a little QR code, get in. Some people had some trouble with the QR code. I don't know if it's like an age thing or what, but people were not operating the QR code well. But they basically had a scrimmage. Like it was like a spring game part 2. And I think this time is a little different because everyone was there except for Travis Hunter. And I believe Khalil Benson was not partaking in the festivities. So mostly everyone was playing, but we didn't get to see all these guys during the spring game. So Scott, if you had to give me like 4 big takeaways, like who was standing out, who was someone that shocked you, and what was just the overall vibe of the practice, the thing?
Yeah, for sure. In terms of takeaways, guys who stood out, I just published a story here this morning here at the Colorado. Go check that out. My takeaways from last night's practice, open practice, which is just a rare event. Us being able to, the media as well as fans being able to take in a Colorado football practice doesn't happen very often, if ever. So last night definitely was a unique opportunity. In terms of standouts, I can give you 2 on offense, 2 on defense. 2 on offense, they're actually 2 receivers. The first one you mentioned that Travis Hunter did not participate in yesterday's open practice. He's healthy. Coach Prime said afterwards that he's good. He just wanted to give him a little rest day, which is understandable. But without Travis out there for Shedeur to throw to, Will Shepard looked like that guy, the Vanderbilt transfer who racked up over 2,000 career receiving yards in the SEC over the last few years. He looked like a bona fide number 1 wide receiver. I mean, going up, climbing the ladder deep down the field to make contested catches multiple times. Shedeur targeted him multiple times, and most times that happened, good things happened. So Will Shepard looks like the real deal. It wouldn't surprise me at all if he led this team this year in receiving yards, receiving touchdowns. He looks that good, and obviously that rapport with Shedeur is already there. If you remember, Will wasn't in Boulder, for spring ball. He just graduated from Vanderbilt, so he was, down there in Tennessee, through the spring. So he just joined the team here this fall, and he's quickly, again, like I said, building that rapport with Shedeur, and they look lethal together. Another receiver who stood out to me, another transfer, Terrell Timmons Jr., the transfer from NC State, a young guy who hasn't had a lot of, experience playing time on the field. I believe he's going to be a redshirt freshman or sophomore this year. So he has at least 3 years of eligibility left. But another guy who clearly has earned the trust of Shedeur. The first play of 11-on-11 was a throw from Shedeur off a play action fake to Terrell Timmons on the sideline. Terrell went up, made a leap and grab on the sideline. And that was just one of a few catches, one of a few targets for Terrell yesterday. He looked explosive, really athletic. Again, has the length and go up and get the ball, can make some plays after the catch. And again, he's the cousin of Chicago Bears receiver Keenan Allen. So obviously there's some real talent running through that blood. So those 2 guys in particular, stood out to me. Again, we all know about Travis Hunter, Jimmy Horn. I talked a lot about LeJontay Wester, the FAU transfer, who I think's in for a big, big season. But those 2 guys, Will Shepard and Terrell Timmons Jr., really give this receiving corps some serious depth in addition to the obvious talent. So this group is 5-6 deep with like legitimate guys, not just guys you can toss out there and trust, but I'm talking about real playmakers. So this receiving corps is crazy deep, crazy talented. On the other side of the ball, a couple of standouts, both pass rushers. Deion Hayes was absolutely unblockable pretty much yesterday during practice. The Pitt transfer led Pitt in tackles for loss last season. This is his final year of eligibility. I think he's a future pro. So does Coach Prime. And he looked the part yesterday. Another pass rusher, a homegrown guy, part of Colorado's 2023 recruiting class, got a little bit of run last year. That's Tajay McCoy. He backfield multiple times, had at least 2 sacks. Was really bullying Jordan Seaton a little bit on that left side of that line a handful of times. So Tajay looks explosive around that edge. And again, similar to the receiving core, there are about 4 or 5 legitimate bona fide pass rushers who can really wreck a game for opponents. Talking about those two, Hayes, Tajay McCoy, BJ Green, the Arizona State transfer, Samuel Okunlola, also from Pitt. I posted it. You might have seen it. He had a crazy spin move and one-on-ones that just, would just take anybody's breath away if you see it. So some real talent on this defensive front. The Bucs only had 27 sacks last year as a team, which was 7th in the Pac-12. That's not going to cut it, but that's not going to be the same case this year in 2024. I think they're going to have one of the best pass rushes in the conference, and that's going to bode well for that defense improving a lot.
Okay, so I'll ask you a couple follow-up questions because your responses were perfect. Will Shepherd, because I do think it was nice to hear a little Terrell Timmons shout, because I do think he was the first receiver or one of the first receivers of this class to commit to Colorado.
Yeah, he was real early on, like right in the December range,
right?
For sure.
And then he was quickly overshadowed because it was like Will Shepherd, LeJohntay Wester. Yeah, they just kept coming. So I think everyone kind of forgot about him. So love a good Terrell Timmons shout. The catch on the sideline.
And also I'll just add into that. I mean, every time Shedeur came to the sideline when the second and third team offense took the field, it was Shedeur talking to LeJohntay, Will, Terrell Timmons Jr., and Jimmy Horn Jr. Those 5 guys were constantly communicating and talking on the sideline. So it looks like, those guys have really, found the ear of Shedeur. And again, the biggest thing is just building that trust with him. And all those guys have it for sure.
That's good. Yeah. You got to build the trust with the quarterback. Otherwise, you don't get the ball. I think that's kind of how it works out. But I was going to ask you about Will Shepherd. Would you say, because I was kind of doing some reading and going through the old X, the old Twitter, and it didn't seem like LeJohntay Wester was getting a ton of targets. So would you say, and I think you could agree with me on this, Shedeur Sanders, when he finds a receiver that he sort of likes or not the most, but he favors, that's who he targets consistently. Would you say that person was Will Shepherd?
Yesterday, I would say it was Will Shepherd and Terrell as well, which is why I mentioned that. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention this, that Coach Prime made it a point talking to the media afterwards that, and it is expected, this offense was really vanilla. They didn't run a lot of the stuff that they would run in a couple weeks in the season opener versus North Dakota State or the rest of this season, which makes sense. It's a lot of spectators. You never know who's going to be watching. But with that being said, I actually tweeted this. LeJohntay did have a bit of a quiet day. I think he had a couple catches. At least one of them was kind of just off a broken play. He did scamper in for a touchdown on kind of like a screen play in the red zone. But I think part of his quiet day was the fact that they didn't want to showcase him too much because, again, I've said it on this show and many other things that I've written. I think LeJohntay is in for a huge season. He's my bet to lead this team in receptions this year. It might be somebody else for receiving yards and touchdowns, like I mentioned earlier, but I think LeJohntay is going to have the most catches on the team this year. He and Shedeur already locked in. You know what I'm saying? Okay. They don't really need to work more on kind of their report. They
connected a lot during the spring game. They connected a lot during the spring game. I think he was the leading receiver by quite a wide margin.
He was, for sure.
It reminded me of last year's spring game where Shedeur looked like he was only comfortable throwing to Travis and then Montana Lamonius Craig, where it was like everyone else didn't seem like they got the ball. It was like LeJohntay Wester or Travis Hunter during the spring game. So I was interested to see that. And then the defense line, you really hit home on that. They have a lot of guys who are rushing the passer, obviously. Did you get a glimpse of who, like, did you see like a starting 4 maybe? Because I feel like that position group is so diverse in terms of who could start, because you have BJ Green, you have Samuel O, you have Deion Hayes and
For sure.
Shane
Yeah,
Coates is the leader.
I think,
Go ahead.
yeah, I think you mentioned a few of those guys. I think in terms of a starting forward, that defensive line is going to get constantly rotated, especially because there's so much depth. But in terms of a starting forward, BJ Green is going to start on the edge. Deion Hayes is going to start on the opposite side of him.
Okay.
So in the interior, Chidozie Nwankwo is also going to start. I would probably at this point give the edge to Shane Coates at least to start. Play game 1, week 1 or whatever. So that would probably be a starting four that I would expect to be rolled out there right away. But again, Samuel O, some of the guys on the interior, they're going to be able to rotate that thing and keep some fresh bodies in there at all times. And, particularly on third down, they're going to have some specialists probably that they bring in just simply to rush the passer. And that's where I see kind of a Tajay McCoy kind of finding his role where, if he's fresh for a 3rd and 7+, you just let him pin his ears back and go get the quarterback. And he's shown that he has the ability to do that with ease. So, again, I really like where this defensive front is, especially in relative to last season.
Okay, I like it. Okay, when we come back, we're going to be talking about the position battles. Are they settled? Are they not? Did that only make it more confusing when we come back? But first, a word from our sponsors over at FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much, and I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sporting like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Okay, Scott Procter, Kevin Borba. We're talking about Colorado's open practice here on Locked On Buffs. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast every single day. Scott, we're talking about the position battles because there was a few that I was really curious to see if they were settled, if they were unsettled, or if it was just who knows what's going on. So let's start with the easy one, or at least I think it's easy. Backup quarterback. Obviously, there's Ryan Staub. There's Walter Taylor. There's the Bethune-Cookman transfer that's kind of new and in the mix recently. Yeah. So who do you think has that QB2 job?
It's Staub. He kind of had a rough start yesterday, probably his first series or two, but he really settled down after that. He looks for sure like the second best quarterback on this roster. Walter Taylor is kind of falling down the depth chart. Keaton Wade is probably still ahead of him, but it looks like, Ponder, who you mentioned from Bethune-Cookman, the transfer, is kind of settled into that QB3 role. He looks kind of an interesting prospect. It's kind of a dual threat, and obviously toss it, but I really like his size and, his willingness to kind of use his legs to extend plays and, kind of move the chains. But in terms of QB2, that's Ryan Staub. Again, that boy can really toss the ball. He made some really impressive throws yesterday to Amarion Miller, to true freshman Draylon Miller. And, he looks confident in himself, and I think he's certainly locked up that QB2 kind of role. And, we saw part of it last year in the Utah game, the game he started against a really good defense. I thought he played pretty well given the circumstances. So I think the offense, Pat Shurmur offensive coordinator, probably feels good, with that QB2 role. Again, hopefully that he doesn't have to be sprung into action at any point this season. But if it comes to that, I think a lot of those guys would feel all right and feel comfortable with Staub kind of running the show from that point.
Yeah, the Ponder transfer was an interesting one. It's interesting that he's so high on the depth chart, you think, because he comes over from Bethune-Cookman. He clearly wasn't the starter there, only has 33 yards and 2 picks and 8 career passing attempts, but clearly he's sort of hit his stride in Boulder. Okay, pivoting from the quarterback position, let's go right. We'll stay in the backfield. Running back. I kept seeing everywhere Charlie Offerdahl, and I won't lie to you. I thought that going into this, that was kind of just like a thing where it wasn't like a thing, But Charlie Offerdahl was taking reps with the ones again. So is he still the number one back, or is that sort of Coach Prime sending a message to Dallin Hayden and the other running backs in the mix there?
Yeah, I think at this point, with less than 2 weeks, before the season opener, I don't think you can really look at, Charlie Offerdahl as anything other than the starting running back at this point. The first play of 11-on-11 yesterday was an inside handoff to Charlie Offerdahl. I mean, he's clearly involved. He's constantly, with that first team offense lining up next to Shador. and they trust him. Coach Prime trusts him. Coach Prime loves him. Coach Shermer trusts him in all three phases of the game, running the football, pass protecting, catching the ball out of the backfield. So again, this isn't just a feel-good story of a former walk-on, kind of getting this opportunity after a few years, sticking it out. I mean, he's talented. He was obviously put on scholarship earlier this spring, and in a moment that clearly meant a lot to him and to Coach Prime. Bringing Coach Prime to tears, having that moment with Charlie, his family, and the whole team in the locker room before the spring game. So Charlie Alfadar is going to be involved. Just how involved he's going to be as the season progresses remains to be seen, because I believe Dallin Hayden is the most talented pure runner on this team, the Ohio State transfer. He showed flashes of that yesterday, had a really one run in particular really showed what he's capable of, a real physical finish. Again, taking the inside handoff and, making a couple guys miss and, laying a boom to whoever tried to, bring him down to the ground. So Dallin Hayden would be my kind of pick at this point to end up being the leading rusher at season's end for his team. But you can't count out Isaiah Augusta, who had some flashes yesterday too, kind of a taller back, but still very speedy.
He's massive. He's like 6'3".
Yeah,
he's the same height as Will Shepherd.
Exactly, which is scary. But Philip Dukes, who I think you had on your show here recently, on Three's national recruiting analyst, he told me that Augusta reminds him a lot of Dylan Edwards, who obviously we know is a real speedy guy, can catch a ball in the backfield, but that's Augusta, but in a bigger frame. You know what I'm saying? So he came on really strong last season to end the year for at Arkansas in the SEC. So those two guys, in addition to Charlie, I think are going to, have most of the say in terms of who gets the carries and the playing time at running back this year. But it's going to be interesting to see how those carries and opportunities are divvied up, especially early on.
Yeah. How'd my favorite gray shirt do? Isaiah Hart. Just after the spring game, I was like, get this dude at running back, because obviously I didn't know what his role was in the secondary, but it wasn't significant enough for him to sort of be in any conversations I had with people, or even in the well-off media videos. You just never really saw him in those videos. So he moves to running back out of necessity, because I believe it was Dallin Hayden, Isaiah Augustov, and wow, I just butchered the hell out of his last name, Augustov, and then who else was back there? I think that was it. So those guys were in Boulder, if I'm remembering correctly. So they were like, okay, we need a running back for the spring game.
Correct.
And he was like the biggest play of the spring game. He had like all the big plays. So did he sort of have any standout moments, or do you think he's kind of a body back there?
So Harge is actually, again, he's one of just a couple guys, him and Travis Hunter, with the gray jersey. So Isaiah Harge is full-time two-way player playing DB, and also he was just exclusively playing receiver yesterday. So that's where you expect him to be, kind of in the slot, if he's not, playing on the defensive side of the ball. And I think what you mentioned, obviously, he showed some flashes at running back at the spring game, but that was more so out of necessity. There was no Charlie. Michael Welch was injured, who I'd be remiss if I didn't mention as well. The true freshman, who probably would slot in as that fourth running back right now on the depth chart, if I had to guess. But yeah, without those guys, Harge was kind of sprung into, action at the running back spot, and he made the most of his opportunities. And that's kind of just the player he is, man. I think you can't take that lightly, that those gray jerseys, they don't get handed out like pieces of candy. Again, it's just Travis and Isaiah Hart. And I think there was just one other player who had it last year, Adam Hopkins, who's now at Charlotte. Again, that's a league company that Hart is now in. They trust him to play on both sides of the ball. It's going to be interesting. Hart is a player. And I think he can be counted on to be called on either side of the ball if it needs to.
Okay. Yeah. Once he saw the gray shirt, I was like, finally. I was like, amen.
For real.
Let's talk about the offensive line, specifically the right tackle spot. I saw Tyler Brown was getting starters reps, and that kind of shocked me, because obviously Khalil Benson wasn't playing, so he was starting out of necessity. Did he do enough to hold on to that job, or if and when Khalil Benson returns, is it still going to be him?
Yeah, Tyler Brown is so interesting and important to this offensive line, because they can move him wherever. I think he's best playing guard. Obviously, he showed that he's capable of playing right tackle yesterday. Coach Prime mentioned after yesterday's practice, when asked about him, that he can easily be plugged in at center as well. So I think he's a really versatile chess piece that this offensive line really needs, because injuries happen. There are going to be guys who play themselves out of a starting role probably at some point, and Tyler Brown's going to be right there to be a veteran presence and experienced presence who can again play multiple positions and be somebody that Shador trusts, which again is a huge factor to the success of this offense and this team as a whole. So I think Tyler Brown, depending on how Jordan Seaton looks to start the season, depending on how Khalil Benson looks to start the season, I think Tyler Brown is somebody who can be plugged in at either, at tackle, again, at guard and at center, as we talked about. So he's going to be somebody who's going to be counted on big time. Again, he obviously didn't play a single snap last year after being ruled ineligible by the NCAA for the two-time transfer rule, the rule that doesn't even exist anymore, which shows how silly that was. But
they abolished it like 10 minutes later.
Literally. So, I mean, Tyler Brown's the strongest player on the team. Most players and coaches have said that. He in the weight room. Him in the weight room is a sight to behold, and you see that a lot, in one-on-ones, in 11-on-11 situations. So Tyler Brown is going to be very key to this offensive line here this season.
Let's swing over to the defense before we move on. There's, I would say, one person that in the secondary that I'm really intrigued by. I do think he could steal someone's spot. Savion Riley, the Vanderbilt/Miami transfer. Saw he had a diving interception.
Yeah, it was a nasty play.
Yeah, do you think he could maybe snatch a starting safety spot? It would have to be, if we're being honest, we all know whose it would be, right? It wouldn't be Shiloh. So is he in a position to sort of emerge as a starter?
I don't think so at this point, but he's been impressive, and that's awesome to see, because you need depth. You need depth. Again, like you said, injuries happen. I think Shiloh and Cameron and Craig kind of had that backfield, that safety room kind of locked up. And obviously they're going to have, at least three corners on the field at all times. But Savion Riley, like I said, he made an incredible diving interception off Shador, off a tip pass that was intended for LeJontay Wester yesterday. And he was out there quite a bit with the twos, making plays, flying around, talking, communicating with the guys in the secondary. Okay. So he looks like he really fits it. You love to see it. He looks like he's an experienced player who's played some football. And he looks like he fits in back there. And again, not a starter, but definitely somebody who will rotate in. And when one of those guys need a blow, if God forbid one of those guys suffer injury, I think, defensive coordinator Robert Livingston would be, more than comfortable with having Savion kind of slide in back there in that secondary.
Next guy up kind of vibes. Okay. Who was the third corner? Obviously, we know it's Travis Hunter, it's Preston Hodge, it's DJ McKinney, but obviously Travis Hunter wasn't there. So it was Hodge, it was McKinney. Who was the third corner that sort of was running with those guys?
Yeah, it's that boy Colton Hood, man, the Auburn transfer who I talked to, a couple months ago. A really good kid, and he was actually slated to be, a fringe starter, if not a true starter, the number 3 corner at Auburn, this fall before he transferred this spring. So Colton Hood, that boy's a player, man. He's been making plays. I'm sure you might have seen on some of the well-off videos, making plays, guarding, Will Shepherd, who we already talked about, guarding Travis Hunter, really holding his own and making plays. That he can really, his lateral quickness is something that he uses to his advantage against some of these speedier receivers, and he has the size to kind of, wall up and make plays at the point of attack against, some receivers like Will Shepherd, who might be taller than him, have a few inches on him. So Colton Hood is one reason why I feel really strong about this Buff secondary, and why I think it'll be one of the best secondaries in the Big 12. When you're talking about Colton Hood, you mentioned, Preston Hodge, DJ McKinney, Travis Hunter, Cameron Craig, Shiloh Sanders. That's an elite group of secondary players, when you're being coached by Deion Sanders and Robert Livingston, who has a ton of NFL experience with the Bengals, coaching some of the best defensive backs in the NFL, some of the best safeties in the NFL. I think that room is really set up to be elite this year.
Yeah, I was really interested to see that secondary. So those are all of our takes on the position battles, or all of Scott's observations. I mean, before we move on, Scott, any other position battle notes that we have to know? Was there a surprise starter? Was there maybe someone who started last year that was not in the mix anymore? Did we see any Amari McNeil? Did we see any offensive line? like Philip Houston. Obviously, the only video I saw of him was against Samuel O, and it didn't go well for him.
For sure. No, I mean, somebody who I mentioned is Arden Walker, talking about that edge room against
Okay.
Somebody who played with the Buffs last year, who's back again this year, didn't leave, didn't get phased by all the transfer additions that were brought into the building. He got home for a set yesterday alongside BJ Green, and he is another, reason why this pass rush room, this defensive line edge group is looking really improved from last year. So Arden Walker is somebody who I like. The tight end position is going to be fascinating to watch because I've been pretty consistent about this. I don't really see somebody at that position who consistently deserves, playing time as opposed to taking one of those, elite receivers off the field. I mean, at some point, they're going to have to need a tight end on the field in the run game to help, one or two of those tackles with some elite pass rushers. But if that comes at a cost, too large of a cost of taking one of your better players off the field, I don't know how often, Pat Shurmur is going to feel comfortable, having, a Sam Hart or, a Charlie Wilson or a Brady Kopez out there at tight end. So that's going to be something to watch to see if somebody, maybe even the Savell Smalls who converted over from defensive line. If one of those guys can, kind of separate themselves from the pack, that would make things a little bit different. But as of right now, it's going to be looking like a lot of 4 and 5 wide receiver sets, which, could get them in trouble, which it did at some points last year, kind of being predictable. And obviously those sets kind of lead to a lot of quick game, and it puts a lot of onus on Shedeur Sanders to get the ball out of his hands quickly, which in turn puts the onus on the offensive line to make sure he's protected, as best as he can be. So that's going to be something to watch, that tight end group for sure.
Yeah, they're not a lot of heavy hitters in that group. Obviously, Savell Smalls, former 5-star, but he was in high school. He played offense sparingly, and then they bring in Sam Hart from Ohio State, who hadn't played at all in college. So I was interested to see how that group turned out. So I'm glad you brought them up. When we come back, we're going to be talking about Scott's biggest concerns stemming from the practice. This episode of Locked On Buffs is brought to you by Gametime. They're an authorized ticket marketplace in Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Price on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets the first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Make sure to go check them out. You could get them for Colorado's game versus North Dakota State. It's probably going to be a sellout crowd. It's going to be rowdy. Boulder's going to be buzzing. And you're going to want to get the best deal possible. So go check out Gametime. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets. MLB tickets, college football tickets, whatever it may be, with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Okay, Scott, what are your concerns? Because I think I formed a few from just observations of others. I think I saw a lot more highlights and posts about sacks than I did see about like deep balls down the field. Like obviously there was quite a few, like, oh, Will Shepherd, great catch here. Oh, Terrell Timmons, great catch on the sidelines, right? But you're naming all these defensive linemen, and I feel like I'm counting at the top of my head right now. It feels like we're at 8 to 10 sacks already, and I don't know how long the thing went, but was the offensive line a concern still, or was the defensive line just that having a good day? Like what are the vibes here? What are our concerns?
It was a bit of a concern. It was my biggest concern, my biggest kind of, negative, so to speak, takeaway from yesterday's practice was the offensive line at times looked a bit too similar to last year's offensive line. And obviously Jordan Seaton on the left side, true freshman, being Shedeur's blindside protector. There's going to be a lot of onus, a lot of attention on him this season. And rightfully so. He's a talented player, but he's a young player who's going to be, pretty much thrown into the fire. And he struggled a bit yesterday. And again, it's a two-edged sword because when you got to block guys like Deion Hayes, who has 4 years of college football experience, BJ Green and Tajay McCoy, who's a really explosive pass rusher, you're going to take your lumps, and that's what happened yesterday. But there were more than a few times where Shedeur was, under duress. That wasn't all Seaton. And that's where kind of my concern comes in, that, especially with how I mentioned earlier, if you don't have a tight end on the field all the time to kind of help one or two of your tackles out with some of those edge rushers, it can get pretty hairy and pretty tricky for Shador, who's, might be wanting to get to a second in this third read and get through his progressions. He might not have all that time, at certain points with some of those guys. So the two tackle spots in particular, Jordan Seaton on the left side and Khalil Benson on that right side, who obviously we didn't see yesterday. Those are going to be, two important spots that is going to determine kind of the ceiling of this offense. And again, we mentioned Tyler Brown. He might have to step in at one of those tackle spots at some points this season. And obviously it probably shouldn't be a surprise that, Colorado added a tackle, just last week, out of the transfer portal, former Florida A&M offensive tackle who they brought in. So obviously they probably feel that it's a need to add, more talent, more depth to this room. And, that was certainly on display yesterday. And again, like I mentioned, I want to emphasize that that defensive line is, I think, really, really good. They have some really, really good pass rushers who are going to give most offensive lines they face some issues. And that was just the case yesterday for Seed and a few of those other offensive linemen. The interior, I'm not too worried about. I think Hank Zelinskis looked really good at center yesterday. I think he has solidified that starting center spot. Justin Mayers is going to be, at guard, and I think you have a few different options, Tyler Brown included, at the other guard spot. But those two tackle spots, Jordan Seaton in particular, with just how inexperienced he is, that's going to be something that, people have to watch and, kind of be a little bit concerned about, at least to start the year.
Yeah, I'm scrolling through the old Twitter and I'm like, oh, sack, oh, another sack. And then I'm hearing you talk about certain people and you're like, yeah, he had a couple sacks here and there. I'm like, oh, how many sacks do we have? It sounds like they're 30.
And again, it was a vanilla offense.
Right.
There was a lot of quick game, and I'm sure, Pat Shurmur and, Deion clearly said that, they wanted to dumb it down. They didn't want to show too much. And certainly that should be taken into consideration with, probably how frustrated Shador looked at certain points. But it's the reality of the situation. We're less than 2 weeks from the opener now. So, it's getting real.
It's getting real. Okay. Were there any concerns about the defense at all? Like what, maybe a certain corner, certain pass? Obviously the pass rush was fine. What about the linebacker group actually?
Right.
Let's pick on them, because I think I've been tabbing them as the weakest group. Obviously, you had a nice post about Nikhai Hill-Green with the interception, I believe on Shador, if I'm not mistaken.
Near interception.
Yeah. Oh, near interception. Okay.
Yeah.
Was that group good, solid, or were they the wink leak as we've kind of expected?
For sure. So that linebacker group is probably the weak link of the defense, as I've deemed it. But Nikhai Hill-Green, he's the best linebacker on the team, man. He made flashes yesterday in the pass game, in the run game, a couple, run stops right at the line of scrimmage. He actually got, to your point, he actually got home to Shador on his sack on a blitz that just wasn't picked up properly by the interior of the offensive line. So, but Nikhai looks good, and I think he's going to improve the play, whoever lines up next to him with that inside linebacker spot. I think it's going to be Trevor Woods, who Coach Prime was blowing about again yesterday after yesterday's practice.
He loves him some Trevor Woods.
And so do I, man. Trevor Woods can play, man. He's looking the part too. He's added, I think, about 15 to 20 pounds of muscle this offseason, bulking up for that linebacker spot. So I like Trevor Woods alongside, Nikhai Hill-Green. Levante Bentley adds some real experience. Jalen Wester, the FAU transfer, brother LeJante, brings some good depth, and so does Johnny Chaney Jr., the FAMU transfer as well. So I kind of like where this linebacker group is at, especially at the top with, like I said, NHG and Trevor. So long as those guys stay healthy, I think they're going to be in a good place to play well with how talented and improved that defensive line is and how good they should be in the back end and the secondary.
Okay, last question before we go. Coach Prime, Robert Livingston, Pat Shurmur, they get together after practice, right? And heading into, because there's 2 weeks now until the next game. I think it's 12 days, if I'm not mistaken, the 29th.
12 days.
What do you think what are the two things? Like, Coach Prime turns to Pat Shurmur and says, hey, we got to get this figured out. Turns to Robert Livingston and says, hey, what do we got? We got to get this figured out. What are those things for the offense and defense, respectively?
Yeah, for offense, it's going to be to stay committed to the run game. Even if even if it starts slow early on, maybe if you have a couple 1, 2, 3 short yard gains, you have to stay committed to it throughout the game. And week 1 matchup with North Dakota State should be a good opportunity for that run game to, kind of get some confidence in itself and, get rolling. So I think for offensively for Shurmur, I think that's probably one reason why, Coach Prime, wanted to keep Shermer in the building, is because Shermer has a history of, making sure his run game stays involved, even if you do have a talented quarterback and some talented receivers.
Right. Yeah, I think it's one of those things where, as Scott reconnects real quick, Pat Shermer has a unique responsibility because he is someone who, you take a job knowing that Shedeur Sanders is the starting quarterback. And obviously you have one of the best quarterbacks in college football, and you don't want to sort of, I don't know, take the ball out of his hands, but at the same time you have to be able to, I guess, you have to be able to mix things up. And the stronger the run game is, the better it will be for Shedeur Sanders. And so I think realistically that's a responsibility. And then I think for Robert Livingston, if I had to guess what Scott was going to say, because we lost a little connection here, I think it's just one of those things where, if you're Robert Livingston, you look at this defense and it's like, okay, we got the good pass rush, and we had a laptop dying situation. So Scott will be back momentarily. I think he's just going to tell us about what they are expecting from that linebacker group, right? Like, they need to make plays, they need to be disruptive, and maybe that goes for the secondary as well. As everyone needs to be disruptive, and so that way the team is maximizing their potential. But we're going to bring Scott back. There we go. Welcome back, Scott Procter, everyone. Defensively, what do we focus on? I said being disruptive and the linebacker group. What would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would just be staying true to himself and him being Robert Livingston. He comes from an NFL background, and that's something that he's going to have to use to his advantage. That should be a strength of this team. I actually just talked to North Dakota State's offensive line coach yesterday, who was my former, college football head coach for 3 years.
Whoa.
He was just talking to me about, and I asked him point blank, and it's pretty interesting just how challenging it is to scout, prepare for a team that has so many new faces, including a brand new defensive coordinator, a first-time defensive coordinator. And he talked about, just Livingston coming from the NFL background, working with Lou Anarumo of the Cincinnati Bengals. He's going to have so many different looks and adjustments and fronts. And that's something that Livingston is going to have to kind of flex his muscles a little bit and give this defense different looks, not allow them to be predictable, not allow an opposing quarterback to kind of be comfortable in what he's seeing in the picture that he's seeing out there in the defense. So I think Livingston is just going to have to just be himself and, bring all the things that he learned in the NFL with the Bengals to this defense and apply it, and just use his playmakers, put them in position to make plays, because you have some crazy athletes in the secondary, up front, at the second level as well, that you just got to allow to play free and just do what they do.
A little controlled chaos here and there. We love it. Okay. Thank you, Scott, for joining us. I appreciate you for hopping on. Everyone go wish him a happy birthday. He turned 35 yesterday. No, I'm just kidding. Scott, I appreciate you hopping on. Tell the people where they could find you, because you got a lot of big pieces coming up.
Absolutely, man. Appreciate you, man. Y'all can follow me on X, formerly known as Twitter, right here down below. Scott Procter, ER, not OR, with an underscore at the end there. But go follow my work on the Coloradoan.com. We actually just added a CU Buffs tab, so a home for all Colorado Buffaloes content is now on our site. But yeah, go tune in. Go follow me on Twitter, man. It's about to get crazy real soon here.
12 days, here we come. This has been another episode of Locked On Buffs.